topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners, and so thrilled to be here with you. It's Tuesday. So, if you have got our books, thank you for doing so. If not, we invite you to get our books. Either one of them, Expert to Influencer or The Entrepreneur's Garden. And today I want to talk about the kindness of one of our readers. So what I want to share is that they want to remain anonymous, and I'm going to respect that. So one of the readers heard one of our podcast episodes, and they found out that we share some of the profits with Kiva.org. So what they did was, not only they shared the book with their community, but they also donated for Kiva.org and sent me the picture of the entrepreneur that they had helped out with. So isn't that powerful? Getting the message across. And that's what the idea is with the books. So keep the kindness circle going, helping people without strings attached. And let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Dr. Dionne.
Good morning, Divya. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. So we start out with a moment from your childhood or youth where you can recall either it was a person or a moment that left a positive mark on you.
I would have to mention my parents. So I had two great parents, which I realize now that I'm older and a parent myself, that it's actually pretty difficult to do. But they were pretty involved. They were engaged. They were smart. And I love their philosophy in that they allowed me to be who I was and to take chances and risks, but did not make me feel like I was attaching my accomplishments to my self-worth. I always felt loved, and that was a good thing.
Isn't that powerful? Because so many kids, that's so near and dear to my heart, because so many people are craving that. They're seeking parents' approval, and in that shapes their whole of their life. So good for your parents.
Thank you. And they're both deceased now, but their legacy lives on for sure in myself and my siblings and what I'm doing with my children and my extended children, their friends when I can.
Of course. Yes. And that's the beauty of positivity, because just like negativity spreads, positivity spreads too, just by being who you are, and you are that example for people. So as you grew up, did you have any particular interest that you persuaded?
So I kind of fell into track and field. I realized in 6th or 7th grade that I ran fast. Well, actually, somebody discovered that I ran fast. And from there, it was just, I was put into track and field, and I essentially competed. And from 6th grade all the way up through graduation, I was on the junior national team. The senior national team ended up getting a full scholarship to Rice University and in Houston. And I can say that was essentially the turning point in my life, in that my parents at the time, they were immigrants and didn't necessarily have all the money in the world. So that afforded me to get an education for free. And I think I attest my ability to run fast to why I'm sitting here with you today.
That is so powerful. Now, tracking can be sort of an individual sport or maybe not. So tell us a little bit more about that, because there's so many parents who are thinking, oh no, I need to put my kid in a team sport or something like tennis or golf, what would you tell them?
So track and field is pretty unique because I ran the 100 meters, but I also ran the 4x1 relay, which is actually a team effort. So I had the best of both worlds in that regard. I will say to parents that I think it's extremely important that your child do something. And as I shared, my gift was running fast. Sometimes people play violin, they, anything, as long as the child is able to discover what their strengths are, I think that's a good thing. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that my parents actually helped me support that. So every weekend they were taking me to track meets, they were traveling, they were doing everything they could to support that effort. So I think it's important that parents definitely will help their children find that gift, because I believe we all have that. And then also how do you water it? How do you water the seeds once you discover them?
That definitely makes sense. That allow the child to flourish in the area that they're good at, because what they're doing is they're developing their strengths, and as they develop their strengths, they're developing the confidence. So for you specifically, like you ran track, what would you say were a couple of lessons that you took along with you to college?
Oh, wow. I was very disciplined. And so essentially my job, I called it a job. It wasn't a job. I didn't get paid for it. But I would get up in the morning, go to school all day. And then after school, I'd be lugging my bags, go straight down to the track and train for at least 2-3 hours, and come home. I still haven't showered. I still haven't eaten, still haven't done my homework. And I essentially did that routine for my entire high school life. And that carried over into my university days. So actually, by the time I got to university, it actually felt pretty easy in that I had that discipline already established, and I had a routine down, essentially.
And that's one of the reasons I love sports. Doesn't matter what format it is, it brings that discipline that nothing else can bring. And also, depending on which sport you're in, not only you're learning that sportsmanship, which is so powerful, which carries you throughout the life. And along with that discipline and camaraderie and team building, it brings just so much. So
Absolutely.
now fast forward, what was your major in college and what was the rest of the journey?
So my undergrad is kinesiology and health sciences. And then I did a master's degree. Actually, sorry, before that I did a teaching degree at University of Toronto. And I also did a master's degree looking at adult education. It's a long title. I'm not going to go into it. And then I did my PhD in organizational learning and development.
So I see a detour that you were in the States, and then you went to University of Toronto. So what was that journey like, and what brought the decision?
So I actually grew up in Toronto, Canada. I was born and raised there. And so I went down to Houston when I got the track scholarship at Rice. And then I went back to Toronto, met my husband, and he was actually on his way to California. And I said, well, I already lived in the States. So we ended up moving to California. And then we've been in the States now for probably like almost 30 years. So essentially this is my home.
Got it. And so now what brought you to organizational learning? Because I can kind of see the progression that, you were in education, and then of course that education and adult learning, it kind of moves towards that understanding how people learn and how to that. But what was it that specific that drew you to organizational learning?
So to your point, so I started my career as a classroom teacher. I taught high school. And if you've ever worked in a high school or had experience with high school, even if as a parent looking at the behaviors of some of the adults in the schools, they also need a little bit of education. So it was an interesting juxtaposition to be dealing with the children in the schools, and also looking at the behaviors of the adults in the schools, which sometimes they were actually one and the same, unfortunately. I can tell you a few stories with what my kids went through, but nonetheless, they're now adults. But essentially, I always had that interest in adults and adult education. What makes people tick? Why do people behave the way they behave? And there's one specific incident that kind of prompted me to look at adults, and that was in my first year teaching. I inherited a class of grade 9 boys who were unruly. They had gone through 3 or 4 other teachers at the time. They were all diverse, many different backgrounds, race, right, ethnicities. And long story short, I came into the classroom and I said to the kids, about 35 grade 9 boys, I said, "You're having a difficult time, but I'm here now. You're gonna have to come to school on time, pull up your pants, do a good job, and do your schoolwork, and we'll be fine." And they all did well. And at the end of the school year, one of the teachers who had difficulty with the class before I inherited came to me and said that I was only good with the kids because I was Black and because I was pretty. And I
Oh,
said, I said, interesting. How do you explain the fact that all the white kids did well, the Hispanic kids did well? I must be really pretty. but nonetheless, it was a pivotal moment, and it wasn't confrontational. But that's what kind of led me to this idea of bias, because the same teacher who essentially reduced my sound teaching ability to my race and gender always complained that people were prejudging her about a limp that she had. And so I'm thinking, so you have the experience of being othered and being treated differently, but yet you just did that to me. So that kind of led me to realize, okay, what's happening with this, with bias and in this exchange in the workplace. And so that's what kind of led me to go to look into this research and eventually be where I am right now.
definitely. And that makes sense. So what was the topic for your PhD? Because PhD is usually concentrated.
So I actually did, I created a workshop called Think You're an Unbiased Teacher, Think Again, just as a result of my teaching experiences. And I created that in 2002. I submitted it for a conference and it was accepted. At the end of it, I had like 35 people say, "Oh, I want you to come to my workplace. I want you to come to my school, my university to facilitate." And I realized that I had a budding business at the time. So, so the University of Georgia allowed me to use that workshop as my research methodology. And so I used that when I went there, and that's how I kind of just got the empirical evidence to show that the workshop that I created actually helps to facilitate intercultural dialogue in a non-threatening manner, and to help kind of merge the cultures in a meaningful way. So that's how I got into this area.
That definitely makes sense. And there are so many different things that pull us together, then that make us different. I haven't seen any person so far who doesn't want to be happy. I haven't seen anybody who likes, well, if they don't like to go on vacation, have some hobbies, or any person who does not want to do good by their children or by their loved ones. So given that, we have so many things that unite us and pull us together rather than making us different. And of course, like when we talk about the differences, we all are different. Like, I don't know about you, but when you're going out with your friends and they have difference of opinion, we all are different. And think about like how, and I want to share this story. Like, I used to do a lot of leadership camps with younger generation kids and all that. So one time somebody had an experience where initially they didn't think they were different, but then they felt they were different. And they said, like, why? So I took them where we were doing the camp. There were a lot of flowers. And I said, okay, here's what I want you to take a look at. Here are different flowers. Tell me which one is prettier, which one is less, which one is more. And they said, this young girl, probably 12 or 13 years old, 7th or 8th grade. Oh, all of them are beautiful. And I said, that's the sentiment you need to carry in your heart. And I've seen her grow up and she stays in touch. And I can tell you that, yes, other people can think what they want to think. It's how you see the world through the lens that makes a difference. And I know that you had mentioned about how you see the lens. So we would love to hear your definitions as to what is DEI.
Well, thanks for sharing. That's a beautiful story. And I think what you're speaking to is the fact that we have the power to reframe situations and to look at things. We have the power to decide how to react and what is meaningful and what's not meaningful. And so I love that you facilitate that with that young girl, and I'm sure you changed her life indefinitely, because sometimes we can succumb to what's happening around us. And And then in respect to DEI, that's actually my approach. Actually, my second book that I'm working on right now, so I won't give away everything, but
Sure.
essentially, I talk about the three things. I kind of reimagine the three letters for DEI, which is D is for decency, E is for excellence, and I is for integrity. And those are the thank you. And then those are the
Awesome.
principles that I live by, and also the principles that I use when I implement DEI in different organizations. So it's important, essentially, that that when we talk about decency, we're talking about respect, making sure that anybody who comes through the doors of any workplace environment has the feeling of belonging, the feeling of respect and dignity. When we talk about excellence, we're talking about essentially hiring the best and the brightest. DEI is not about just giving somebody a job because they look a certain way or because they call themselves a certain thing. That's not what it is. And I can say that having worked in HR for many years, that is not how it operates. It should not operate. And then the last one is integrity. And when we talk about integrity, I'm talking about like accountability, and that's the responsibility of organizations. So are you ensuring that your environment is conducive for everyone to feel comfortable? Is your environment free of bullying, harassment, which is unfortunately a very common emerging trend happening that's been normalized, I believe, in different organizations. So there's certain responsibilities that organizations have to their employees, and it's actually the law. I mean, DEI came out of the Civil Rights Movement, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and so it's not a new thing. There's always been a concern and an acceptance and an expectation that people be treated fairly and properly in the workplace.
Yeah, no, these are such valid points. So you have brought up some very good points. Let's talk about hiring. You said that, hire the best and the brightest. So let's say there's an organization and you've been in human resources, so you know about that. They want diverse thinking. They want people coming from different backgrounds so that their teams are strong, their culture is strong. What would you recommend in both the terms? So for a lot of times, what happens is that, especially the Gen Z and with quiet quitting and the resignation that that came out of the pandemic, what would you tell employers and what would you tell the employees to look for?
So having Gen Zs on my team, I understand the generational differences. I think it's important to be intentional in looking for diversity. But when I say that, there's a caveat. It's not I'm going to disqualify somebody in favor of somebody else, or I'm going to go for the person who fits a certain demographic or fits a certain thing because I have to fit this quota. I don't believe in that. I think it's a matter of, as I said, it's about hiring the best and the brightest. But that said, the whole notion of DEI is to ensure that the best and the brightest have an opportunity to get through the door and to be considered. And so some of the best practices that I employ and that I stress where when I work is, okay, so how is there, first of all, there should be at least 2-3 people at any given time to look at one resume and to consider, like, one person should not have all the power, because you can look at a resume and say, oh, that person went to the same school I did. Oh, they must be wonderful. Or that person was in
Oh, those are one of the very obvious biases that I've seen with my clients as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Or that person's name has too many consonants. I'm going to throw it in the garbage. I mean, so those are things where that's where the accountability piece comes in, where there should be teams. And I would even say interdisciplinary teams. So one person from, say, one finance, and one person from HR, one person from facility, whatever, facilities, but making sure you have a diverse team of people looking at the resumes. So that way your bias is not full print, but you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to mitigate the biases in those processes.
So you're bringing different perspectives even to hire, and that definitely allows the elimination, or at least as far as we can go, the reduction or whatever of bias. And now, to kind of go a little bit deep into this, so many organizations, like so many of my clients are telling and like sharing that now they're using automated bots that, you get like 10,000 resumes sometimes for a job, or it could be like 500, or it could be 300. So for that process, do you have any thoughts on that?
So it's all definitely. It's that when you look at the information coming in, you have to kind of triage it. And even there, when you triage, you can still it still requires somebody to look at all the whole bulk and decide, okay, is this going to the I'm going to consider pile? Is this a throwaway pile? Is this a possible hiring pile? So I think at every stage possible, there should be multiple eyes on in the process.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that that you're mitigating bias where you can, and unfortunately it doesn't always happen, but that's why I also advise people to be persistent. I think if you apply for something online, you hear nothing. I mean, do some research. The internet is a wonderful thing. Research the hiring manager, research the CEO. Say, hey, I applied for this particular position. I'm very interested. Just do something. But sometimes I wouldn't just wait on one area of and hoping that you're going to get the attention that you deserve or want.
That's definitely a good strategy to have, because what you're doing is you're taking reins in your hands. And also, kind of going back to, we were talking about the AI is essential, that, how do you train AI? Because the way you are training AI, whatever you're feeding into it, is also important to keep in track. And as such, going back to like what you said, for the employees, as they're going about it, doing research and all that, is very powerful. Okay, so now we have created a really good structure, employees onboarded, and you talked about some bullying and harassment. So how can organizations go about creating that culture of respect and excellence and accountability? Accountability is such a integral part. It's about like owning. So it goes both ways. It's like employees not walking in and expecting a star to show up for work. That, oh, I showed up. Yay. It, it goes beyond that. So let's dive into that.
So the infrastructure has to be put in place, and that actually starts with the head of the organization, and leadership team. And so if the head of an organization is not on board to create a culture of inclusivity, it's not going to happen. And I've seen situations where there have been attempts to kind of create a culture where it should to create a culture of that's ideal. But sometimes if a leader's not on board or doesn't have the capability to be on board, it's futile. It's futile efforts. So so that's my first point. But ultimately, sometimes it has to happen from the ground up, as opposed to the head down. And I say that with regard to situations where there have been workplace environments where employees have basically revolted, and they said, you know what, I don't like the way I'm being treated here, or I'm complaining about this. Or they decide to file a complaint, go to the EEOC or something. And that in turn forces the powers that be to start to shift and change their lens and their approach to how they govern the workplace environments. So, but I also, with that, I believe that DEI should be embedded in all areas. And so when I've taken positions as chief diversity officer or as a head of diversity in different places, I've always candidly asked, I said, is this a figurehead position? Or am I actually going to be doing some work here? Am I allowed to actually do what I was hired to do? And because I'm not a person, you can probably tell, I'm not someone who just will sit there and just not say what I think.
Definitely not. Yeah.
And there are times where I had to say, hey, you know what? Oh, that's why, I was hired for this. This is why I'm sharing my opinion. And so I think it's important that when you're implementing DEI, that it's not just kind of like an additive. It's not over there. It's not in one area. It should be permeated across the entire organization. So then it doesn't feel like an anomaly, and it starts to feel normal. So in my role, I show up everywhere, and so I also am available to people to respond to situations that may arise, anywhere from coaching to recommendations to HR to get things evaluated, looking at policies and procedures. How are they functioning? And one thing in particular I do with teams and leaders is if you happen to have the same outcome over and over again, where a particular group of people is not are basically left on the margins, or they're not getting what they should in comparison to others, that means that the methodology is not right. That means the protocol has to be assessed. And sometimes people don't realize that when there are issues in organizations, it could be people or process. And sometimes people will they would think that it's a people issue, but it's actually a process issue. And so when I my approach to this work is to look at, okay, how are we doing things? How are the procedures and the protocols, and are they yielding the outcomes that we want? And then from there you can say, okay, maybe it was a people issue. But I like to look at how the structure is at first.
Yeah, that makes sense, because what you're doing is that, are we providing the tools? Are we providing the resources for people to be successful?
Absolutely.
And we have taken a look at the processes. Let's say the processes are in place. What are the responsibilities of any employee at any stage? Because the way I see it is that, when you're doing a handshake, you need both whether it's the one person or two person, or whether it's a hug, or whether it's smiling at each other, you need the participation of both. So what can employees do so that they can step into leadership? Because everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to learn. How can they show up as leaders and take some of the responsibility?
That's a big one, Divya. I think I wrote down the word buy-in. First, there should be buy-in to the philosophy and what people want for the culture. And I always say that everybody has a hand in how they create their own culture. So I say I don't get paid enough money to go into a workplace environment for 8 hours and be mistreated or deal with rude people, or having a frog in my throat, afraid to see somebody and turn the other way. I do not believe in entering those kind of environments. So I always tell employees that you have if you have ownership, you decide, you dictate the rules of engagement with people, you dictate the environment that you want to enter into. So that's the first thing. At the same time, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, is the notion of self-reflection. I think people should recognize, I'll go back to the example I shared with the my colleague with teaching and basically saying that I was with the students. That was a moment where this person at the same time is complaining that she's not being treated properly. She basically just kind of just reduced my sound teaching ability. So I think it's twofold. It's buying into the organization, buying into the philosophy, doing what you can, as you said, to show kindness, to be respectful, to use proper tone, don't publicly humiliate, all those things that are essentially bullying, and also practice self-reflection and say, okay, where do I go? Where did I go wrong?
Mm.
Equally important, apologize when you make a mistake, because no one here is infallible. And I've seen leaders, I've seen people who do not want to take responsibility, and they don't want to say I'm sorry, but yet they want to advance to the next level. But essentially, I remember someone saying, you're often promoted to the job you're already doing. And
Yeah.
so if you're not showing that you have the capability to be respectful and accommodating and a team player at a particular level, you're not going to be considered for the next level.
Very true. And there are two possibilities. So during my coaching experience also, I've had people kind of come and share that, oh, that person is really, really mean to me and bad to me. And there can be two possibilities there. Either one, like for one of my clients, we explored that, okay, is she like that with everyone, or is she just like that with you? And my client, let's say her name is Jenna said, oh, April is like that with everyone. So then that was the case for the reframing, that it's nothing personal. And if you're taking it personally, let's reframe it and let's take a look at it. How can we define the rules of engagement, as you mentioned? Or it can be a reality. So it can be a toxic boss. So as you mentioned about that, self-reflection is the key. Sitting down and looking at the situation. And it's hard, because emotions do have a tendency of taking over. So with your experience, and as you said that, you mentioned that you are interested in learning what is it that makes people tick. So when people are in the throes of emotion, what would you highlight as 1 or 2 steps that can help them take a step back and look at the situation objectively?
You just said it, take a step back. I mean, sometimes you have to like definitely hold your tongue and just shut it down. And sometimes you have to actually physically leave an environment in order
Mhm.
to not be pulled into the gutter or the pig pen, whatever. It depends on the day. That's what I call it. Um, and you raise a good point, because we tend to want to personalize things when things happen. And that's why I love the book, The Four Agreements.
Oh,
Ron
yes.
Ruiz, because his first agreement is that it's don't take things personally. It's not about you, and most of the time it's not even, it has nothing to do with you. It's somebody else's stuff they're working through, and you happen to be the person there. And so and that's a difficult thing. Intellectually, it's easy to say that, but in the moment, with our emotions, as you shared, it's difficult to kind of not take things personally. But to answer your question, I believe just hold your tongue where you can, or I do this.
Yeah.
or just walk away. It's very difficult. And I'm not sitting here as somebody who's perfect. I'm not saying I'm not someone who's not taking the bait and had to challenge somebody who was being disrespectful, because I do believe that you should challenge bullies. But most cases I will walk away, and I will circle back to that person. Or sometimes your silence troubles somebody so deeply that they'll come back to you and apologize.
That is powerful. When you're silent, it can be so powerful that it can even make another person uncomfortable in that conversation. So that's one thing to kind of keep in your toolkit. And tell us more about the book that you're writing that's coming out, when it's coming out, when can people anticipate it? How can people connect with you? Where can they reach you?
Oh, thank you. So the plan is for it to come out this summer, and again, it's looking at essentially the working title is it's the 3 truths of DEI, and I can be reached at my website is PoultonConsultingGroup.com. My individual website is coming soon, drdionnepoulton.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually the best place to reach me if you'd like to connect. And I'm also on Facebook, but LinkedIn is probably the primary source.
Mm. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed this deep conversation. I love the work that you're doing. I love the fact that we were able to connect on this, and we're not the same people, but we have the same mission, clearly. And I just thank you for having me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, because you brought completely different outlook to what is out there, that how we can bring those different perspectives and make us stronger, because at the end of the day, we are all going towards the same destination. We want to live our lives, have meaningful conversations, have fulfilled lives, do good by yourself, do good by your family, by your neighbors, community, and humanity. So why not? The question to ask over here is that sometimes we say, oh, how would that be possible? But the question to ask is, what if it is possible? And you have provided a lot of strategies and tactics that people can take and run with. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you too, Divya. Good to be with you.
Absolutely. And thank you, wonderful audience, for being part of our show. You are amazing, and we want to share our love with you, because sometimes life can be tough. And reach out to us, let us know who can we bring in so that you can live the life that you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Be well, take care, and see you all next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.